and that's part of the AHA Foundation, an organization that works to combat female genital mutilation, honor violence, and forced marriage in the U.S. So first off, I want to thank our sponsors for making this event possible. I'd like to thank the Critical Thinking Unit, the Thomas J. Harris Institute for Hispanic and International Communication, and Texas Tech Women's and Gender Studies. So, a brief overview of what we're going to be talking about today. So, I'm going to be providing some background information on what female genital mutilation is and other components surrounding it, because it's really important that all of us are on the same page with what it is, and then with that information in mind, I'll go ahead and hand it off to FA, our featured speaker, to share her story. And then if you all have any questions throughout the presentation, we'll have a specific amount of time, about 10-15 minutes towards the end of our presentation, to ask any questions. And if anyone wants to raise their hand, I'll hand the mic over to you and you can ask FA a question. So make sure you hold those questions until the end. Also, I want to preface that as the name of our event indicates, we're going to be having very frank and open dialogue. And some of the information that you're going to be listening to, you may wonder how you can get involved, what you can do to help. And keep in mind that throughout the entire presentation, by you simply being here, you're already making a difference, because you can share what you learned today to at least one person. And we all know that in order to stimulate change, we need to start a conversation first. So that's the first step. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So what is female genital mutilation? A lot of people have never heard of this practice, or if they do, they don't have too much knowledge of it. So it's really important that we are able to flesh that out. So female genital mutilation is a practice that involves removal of external female genitalia, and it is a human rights violation. Specifically, it affects 200 million women across the world. So it happens more often than we think. And specifically, it happens in 30 countries. It happens in Africa, the Middle East, Asia, parts of Europe, Canada, South America. And a lot of people are surprised to hear that it actually happens right here in the United States. And before we get into that, I want to talk about different forms of FGM, because it's really important that we all know what this practice looks like. So I have a visual up here. And this is a practice that girls undergo ages infancy all the way up to their late teen years or older. Different types are prevalent in different cultures. So in certain regions of the world, type 1 may be more common, type 2 or type 3. So specifically, type 1 involves partial or complete removal of the clitoris. And then you have type 2, which involves partial or complete removal of the clitoris in addition to the labia minora, and oftentimes the labia majora to narrow the vaginal opening. And then you have type 3. This is the most severe form of female genital mutilation, known as infibulation. Other people call it vaginal fusion, and this involves removal of all external genitalia, and the remaining skin is sewn together to create a seal. And in this healing process, these girls' legs are tied together and they're not allowed to move, because if they do, the wound will reopen and they have to get stitched up again. For the girls who undergo this practice as infants, they don't even realize what happened to them, so they grow up thinking that what they look like is normal. For girls who can remember it, it can cause extreme psychological trauma. And for all of these girls, this causes physical trauma. These are just some examples of the effects of female genital mutilation. This is not an extensive list. Some side effects that can happen from this. For example, the people who do the cutting, the ones who are removing these girls' external genitalia, oftentimes use the same blade, and if that same blade is used on another girl, and that previous girl was HIV positive, HIV has now been transmitted. This can also cause death. Death due to bleeding out to death. Death giving childbirth, and higher probability of stillbirth. It can cause psychological problems as well. As you can see up here, some examples are depression, memory loss, and post-traumatic stress disorders. So as you can see, this practice has no medical or health benefits. This is only harming these girls. So you may be wondering, well, why is female genital mutilation practiced? And to give you a singular answer is impossible, because depending on the culture, depending on the region, it's practiced for a variety of different reasons, but there are some overarching reasons. For instance, it's common in societies where patriarchal ties are common, whereas the man is viewed as dominant over the woman. Another example, it's used as a tool to ensure purity for marriage so that a woman can find a suitable husband. Also, a tool to lower promiscuity, so that a woman does not engage in sexual intercourse before marriage or outside of marriage, as a tool to suppress a woman's sexuality. It has religious ties. A lot of people think that this practice is simply isolated to one religion, and it's not. This is a practice in Islam, Christianity, Catholicism, and more. So again, keep that in mind. And there are also social implications as well. A lot of people think, well, this is how it always has been done. Our elders support this, so we're going to keep practicing it. Or if my girl doesn't undergo FGM, she's going to be alienated from her community. Or she's not going to find a suitable husband. So we have to have them go through this. But my answer to that is that this is a human rights violation, and none of these reasons should warrant a girl having to undergo this practice, because they are forced against their will to undergo FGM. So now that I've given you some background information so far, I want us to focus on this number right up here, 513,000. According to the CDC, this is the number of women and girls at risk of female genital mutilation in the United States. So this is not just a practice that is practiced all over the world, but it's also right here in the United States. You may be surprised when you see this visual up here. There are 5 states in dark orange that show 25,000 or more girls at risk of female genital mutilation. And you see what's up there? Texas. Texas is one of the top 5 states in the U.S. with the most girls at risk of female genital mutilation. So because we're here at Texas Tech, we live in Lubbock, let's focus on statistics of this practice happening in Texas. So Texas has over 33,000 women at risk, with California number 1, followed by New York, Minnesota, of course Texas, and then Maryland. Specifically in Texas, we have 3 metropolitan areas with the most girls at risk of female genital mutilation. We have Austin at 1,583, Houston at over 11,000, and the number 1 metropolitan area with the most girls at risk of female genital mutilation is Dallas at almost 16,000. So this practice isn't just practiced around the world. It's not just practiced in the U.S. It's practiced right here in Texas, and it would not surprise me if there are girls here at Texas Tech University who are at risk or who have undergone this practice. And just to reinforce how prevalent it is in Texas, as you can see, Dallas is number 9 on that list. So of all the metropolitan areas in the U.S., Dallas is number 9 on that list. So again, this just really shows how important it is, specifically for our community, to be able to talk about this, because it's happening right here. So you may be wondering, surely this is illegal. Surely it's illegal in the United States for a girl to be forced to undergo this practice against her will and experience lifelong physical and psychological trauma. Luckily, in 35 states, FGM is illegal. But in 15 states in the United States, this practice is legal. And this is because of a federal case last year. A judge said, it is unconstitutional to decide whether or not female genital mutilation should be legal or not around all 50 states, that it is up to the states to decide. And so that's why we're going state by state to pass legislation. Luckily in Texas, we do have anti-FGM legislation. Specifically, as you can see up here, we have felony charges that prosecute the parents and the practitioner, so the person who actually forces these girls to undergo it by removing their genitalia. Vacation cutting is not allowed, so it is illegal to take a girl out of the state of Texas to undergo female genital mutilation. Culture is also not a defense, so families can't say, oh, well, it's part of our culture to practice this. In Texas, that is illegal. But we can improve this even more by adding some provisions. First off, by prosecuting the people who help facilitate it. So not just the parents, not just the practitioner, but anyone who is knowingly putting these girls through this practice and supporting it. And also adding more education and outreach provisions, because it's really important that here in Texas we're educated about it, because again, a lot of people don't know that this practice exists, and so we need to add more provisions to be able to generate more awareness. So I want you all to know, like I said earlier, that together all of us can make a difference simply by just having a conversation with someone, simply by just saying, you know what I learned about today? I learned about female genital mutilation, and saying what it is. And even if someone's uncomfortable about it, you don't stop. You keep talking about it, because we need to get comfortable with talking about these things. And I think something that all of us can take away from this is that FGM is not only violence against women, it's a human rights issue, it's an equality issue, and it's a public health issue. So that concludes my portion of the presentation, and I would like to introduce F.A., our speaker. F.A. Cole is an award-winning humanitarian, women's rights activist, and survivor of female genital mutilation. One of her books, Distant Sunrise, Strengthen Her Pain and Forgive, helps offer mechanisms to overcome tragedies and unforgiveness, and she helps people view themselves as victors instead of victims, which is a very powerful statement. So F.A. flew all the way in from Maryland to be here with us today, so I'd like to give her a round of applause as she shares her story.
I need you to help me out. Thanks, Alana. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for making time to be here. I know maybe some of you are here because of extra credit. I remember when I was in college, I would do anything for extra credit. But I promise you, this is one topic for extra credit that will live with you hopefully for the rest of your life and do actually force you to go out there and help make a difference. I'm looking around the room, I see people with a lot of what I call privilege that you can actually use in the fight to end FGM. It's not about survivors like myself. It's about girls who are born on American soil to immigrant parents who are at risk. Nobody in this room can actually do anything for me. My vagina has already been butchered. It's been mutilated, so there's no fixing it. Even though I had reconstructive surgery or restorative surgery, like they prefer to call it, 2 years ago. But that's the fun part, so we'll get into that later. How many of you are excited to be here, apart from just for special, what's the thing called? Extra credit? Yeah, so let's talk about my vagina for a few minutes. I can go sit down while what we talk about marinate. So I'm originally from Sierra Leone, West Africa. I don't know if any of you have actually heard about Sierra Leone. It's like an island. It's located on the Atlantic Ocean. And I came to America 22 years ago. Yes, I went to school in New York. I graduated from Marymount, that's now Fordham University. And then somebody promised me a job. I came to Maryland, there was no job. I hate Maryland. I've lived there for 13 years? I love New York. If I could get a job today, I would go back to New York. I really, really love New York because people think that America is a melting pot of the world. I think New York is a melting pot. When I was there, all I had to do was take the train and go into the village, and I saw people that looked like me, crazy hairstyle, crazy way of dressing, and I blended in. They don't judge, but Maryland, Virginia, Washington, D.C., oh, it's like living in London all over. But so, I was born to a Catholic father and a Methodist mom. Usually when people hear FGM, they think it's a Muslim thing, all these Muslims and their practices. This is how they control their women. FGM, like Alana said, is not a, religion thing. It's not a religion issue, a religious thing. I also say it's not a tradition thing and it's not a culture thing. People hide behind culture and tradition to harm little girls and boys. And for me, any practice that actually harms kids and anybody, it's something I don't want to be a part of. And that's why I travel locally, internationally, and talk about my story. And so I remember it was a few weeks before August 1st. First of all, I've survived all forms of sexual violence from age 6 upward. But I don't remember the dates that those abuses occurred, but I'll never forget the night of August 1st, 1984. That's when I underwent the most brutal form of what I call the most brutal form of sexual violence. So my father and my stepmom, who's actually half Lebanese, half Sierra Leonean. So they called us, my sister and I, to the living room, and they said, we were going to this place to be made into women. I was 11, I hadn't even had my period, so I didn't even know anything about womanhood. And so what they always tell these girls, and it's also universal, they tell you that when you come back from this really special place, you get lots and lots of presents. So what little child doesn't like presents? Even as an adult, most of us like surprise gifts, right? And so I was focused on getting these presents, even though we told Papa that we didn't want to go through it. Well, my sister spoke out, but they didn't listen to us. My mom, on the other hand, had nothing to do with us going. She did play a role, I believe, because if she had said no when she was asked, it would not have happened. But she said my father never asked her. I believe my father, by the way. I believe that my father did ask. He's not here anymore to, defend himself, but I believe that he did reach out to her. Anyway, so we got there that night, that evening, and me, my sister, my older sister Matilda, and we were greeted with, songs and chants with about a dozen women. These women were all strangers with the exception of my stepmom and her mom. So they told us, and this is a secluded area, it's in the forest, but they had like a hut made of zinc that, it had a mattress casually thrown on the floor that we slept on. But we got there and they told us to strip, and so we did. We didn't know what awaits us. They took us outside to wait underneath the tree. And so they prepared what I call the bed of death. And they came for my sister because they don't want to cut into the age. Since she was older, she goes first, just in case she decides to run. So they do the older first down to the youngest. And it happens in the Gambia, the girls are usually babies, 8 days old. And in the Gambia, it's actually infibulation, where they remove everything. And they just sew you up, or like Alana said, they'll, press the legs together. And they leave just a tiny bit of hole. What you see there, that's what infibulation looks like. That's actually typed through the image that you have right there. And they leave a tiny bit of hole for passage, for urination. So they took my sister, and I didn't know what was happening because they were shouting and screaming, and before we got there, they had actually tried a lot. So they came to get me, they blindfolded me, and my hands were tied behind my back, and I was led by some woman to what I call the bed of death. And they pinned me on the floor, on the ground. I believe it was 2 or 4 on each side. They spread my legs wide open and pinned me, held them there. And then the cutter sat on top of me. Remember, I was naked, I was 11, and the shock was just so much. Because I had no idea what was going to happen. why would a father allow his children to be tortured? And whenever you go some places to talk, if you see me closing my eyes, it's because I'm trying to control the panic attacks, so just bear with me. I don't understand how a father or even a parent can pay money, because these cops get paid a lot of money. If you come from a wealthy family, so it's between $65 to $100 per girl. And that's why FGM is so hard to eradicate, especially in countries in Africa, because this is their livelihood. You think you're going to come in and tell me that I can no longer make money. So the more girls I cut, if I charge $100 a day and they get to cut 100 girls a day, that's a lot of money. And so my father paid. Some people get, you know, gold, expensive African authentic fabric, expensive wine, you know. And so they got me, and I believe that she used, like Alana's mentioned earlier, they used the same razor, box cutter, knife, whatever sharp object they could get their hands on. So whatever she used on my sister, she used on me, and as she began to cut my clitoris, I began to fight because the shock was too much. I wasn't expecting that. And I began to fight and wriggle under her. I was blindfolded, my hands were tied behind my back, and my legs were pinned out, so I really couldn't do anything. And this woman was about 10 times my size. She was really heavy. So I don't know what got into me. With the little strength I had in me, something just told me I pulled myself forward and I beat her bum. And that's how I knew she was naked also. So after I beat her, they gagged me so that nobody could even, I couldn't even do that anymore. After she was done doing what she did, I was pulled up and they removed the blindfolds, and I looked down and I noticed that I was covered in blood, and I was led to sit under the tree. Nobody said anything to us. They didn't tell us why they did that. I was 11 years old. This was, 35 years ago. I'm 46, and I remember it as if it just happened a few seconds ago. And as I stand here and talk, there were girls who are actually now having their clitorises amputated, and they will grow up to be women like me if they make it. Because I've heard stories, even in my country, Sierra Leone, girls have died, they hemorrhaged to death. And the sad part of it all is, when that happens, these women actually blame the girls. They call them witches, that, oh, you go through this, you're not supposed to die. That's how uneducated they are. They don't really know the damage that they're doing to these girls. And also, depending on the country, some of them believe that they're actually doing us a favor, you know? They do, because they went through it themselves. Their parents, their moms love them, so they have to put their daughters through it. And that's why we have to start the conversation. It's a very comfortable thing to talk about, especially if you don't look like me. And even for those who look like me, still find it uncomfortable to talk about. But hey, in our private rooms, when we're dealing with other people, we're free to talk about the vagina, right? So why not talk about FGM? It's associated, you know, same thing. So we just really have to be comfortable, a little bit, get comfortable talking about uncomfortable situations. They tell us that a girl who does not undergo FGM would not get married. I just got married at 46, so I don't know what happened there, and I went through FGM. Maybe I need to talk to these women, because they said, oh, once you undergo FGM, you're marriageable, men, you know, men will want to marry you. I'm like, wow, what happened in my case? So, yeah. And then also, the other myth is that a girl who does not undergo FGM is unclean. They smell. And I've said this in my country, some of the foul-smelling girls I've ever encountered are girls who actually underwent FGM. So what happened there? You know, another myth. And they also, in some cultures, they say that it drives away the evil spirit. I don't know what evil spirit, but it drives away the evil spirit. And also they make it look like it's a class thing. I don't know how many of you are familiar. In India, they have the caste class thing. In Sierra Leone also, in some of these countries, they have that also. So when you have undergone FGM and you're talking with other survivors, if a girl comes in who has not undergone FGM, you stop talking. Because to you, they're beneath you. I don't care about that. You know, I would rather be the girl who's shunned for not undergoing FGM than be the one who's actually shunned. So those are some of the reasons they say they practice FGM. And they also say that they do it for the men. Some of the men with whom I've spoken say they would never marry a girl who's undergone FGM. Why? One guy from Senegal, because I'm a software trainer, I train engineers for the Patent and Trademark Office in Alexandria, that's my full-time job. He actually said being with a girl who's undergone FGM, being with them sexually, is a calorie burner. I'm like, okay, because he said you have to work overtime because most of these girls sexually, there's nothing there. And I can actually testify to that. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not, especially if you're with a man who does not care about what you've gone through. And that's the problem I have with some of my African brothers. They know what you've been through, but they just don't care. One man once said, well, he's for FGM because it controls, again, it's a control thing. It controls the girl so that way she can be faithful to one man. Of course, if your ability to enjoy sex is not there, you don't even need to be with any man, you know. And that's why in some of these countries they have multiple wives, you know, polygamy. And so he said, well, my mom went through it and she's fine. I said, but do you have sex with your mom? You haven't had sex with your mom. So how would you know that she's fine? Just by looking at her, you can tell she's fine. Internally, we believe. But most of these women are afraid to talk because we don't want to be judged. People have actually blamed survivors of FGM. That's the other thing. We need to talk about it. It's not our fault. I was 11. What African girl, a girl from a country in Africa, is going to say no to her father? Especially if he takes care of you, you want to go to school, you want to get an education, you do what he wants you to do. But unfortunately, my father regretted it. It was too late. You know, the damage was already done. And I remember, when we got out, it wasn't so much hurt, it was betrayal that I felt. Because we went back to see my mom, and she asked us what they did to us. It's not as if it was any secret. So I told her, because in the bushes, they also brainwash these girls. If you talk about it, your stomach will swell and you'll die. When I got out, the first thing I did when I went back to school, I was informed too. I told a friend of mine, Violet, who's now in England. I told her everything that happened. And I went home, waited to see if my stomach would actually swell and I'll die. It didn't happen. And so after that, I started talking about it to anybody who would listen. So when my mom asked and I said, oh, they cut with tin in Creaming, they cut thing, and she just laughed. And it was at that moment that I actually said, oh wow, nobody really cares. Not even our mom. In Africa, yes, some parts of Africa, showing affection to your kids, hugging, it's not a big thing, it's not done. But I said this could have been one time that she could have actually embraced us and said, you know what, everything is going to be okay. Because I screamed out for her. I wanted her to come to my rescue, but she didn't. She wasn't there. And then when we got out, all she could do was laugh. I later confronted her. She said she never did that. She didn't remember. She doesn't remember. I said, yeah, you wouldn't because you did it. People who hurt people don't remember about the hurt, or they choose to forget about it. But you who are the receiving end, you never forget. And that's why I'll never forget the night of August 1st. I'm not remembering it because I'm still in anger. I lived in anger for more than 20 years, and it didn't do me any good. And that's why I started talking about it, because it's therapeutic for me. I'm currently in therapy. I have one of the best therapists, Joanna Vergat. She's really awesome. And we meet once a week. We talk about whatever we want to talk about. And she's been really helpful. And so that you are here today, you've listened to some of my story. sex is usually painful on and off, but I thank God that my husband, I call her the beneficiary of my surgery. 2017, I had restorative surgery, and sometimes he'll travel with me and my son. It helps to be with someone who understands your pain. You don't have to have gone through something to understand, to have empathy, but he understands. And if I don't want to be touched, I feel bad for the guy, you know? Thankfully, nothing against my African brothers, but he's Native American Irish. He understands. And sometimes I've been with different men from different parts of the world, and that's the thing. They say it causes promiscuity. Oh, big lie, it doesn't. It actually does the opposite, because we go from man to man looking for satisfaction, because we don't even know that sex is not supposed to be painful, but that's all we know. But survivors who actually were not virgins when they went through it, they can tell you that, oh, sex was better when I had my clitoris, and now I don't even want to be touched. But some of these women are in denial. So we just have to start the conversation. I travel and I share my story, like I said, not because of me, but the little girl who might be a next door neighbor, the family from Egypt, the family from Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, the Gambia. Now it's happening in Colombia, South America. We're fighting to eradicate, and new countries just keep popping up with new ways to suppress the girl child. And we just have to talk about it, because they've also looking for loopholes. The Syrian community in the Washington, D.C. area. Now that we worked with actually Senator Black, Global Women Peace Foundation, I'm part of the board of directors who work with Senator Black, and now FGM carries 25 to life. And I'm all for it, for life. They should spend life in prison. And when the girl gets older, she wants to sue her parents, she actually can if she wanted to. So that's a good thing. I've worked with legislators in Maine. Maine, I don't know what's going on over there. FGM should be a bipartisan issue, but it's not in Maine. The Democrats are fighting the Republicans, so I don't know. And then Pennsylvania also, I work with Tom Murray, and they just passed legislation in Pennsylvania now. So things are happening, but more needs to be done. We need to talk about it. And I know it will be difficult for someone like you who has not undergone it, and your skin is different from mine. I've been called the white man's puppet because I do these talks. I've been called all sorts of names, a sellout, that I've sold my soul to the devil. I'm like, no, they gave me over to the devil August 1st, 1984, and I went through so much holy oil and holy water to get that stuff behind me, because that's the other part. Female genital mutilation, it's not just psychological, it doesn't just affect us psychologically, mentally, sexually. It also has a spiritual impact that most people are not aware of, and they don't talk about it. And some of the men that they say they're doing this for, like I was saying earlier, they don't want to have anything to do with women who want to go to the gym. I've talked to a few men, and they say they will never marry a survivor of female genital mutilation because they can handle that. So if they're doing it for the men, and the men are now saying they don't want it, why are they still doing it? Why are we still doing it? Education is needed. Even though I'm one of them, when I go home, I have a watch called Take Back the Power. I go home every year, every May, and I do that. And I also collect sanitary napkins. So if you ever want to donate sanitary napkins, please reach out. I take a lot and I ship them home, and I actually give you proof that I do distribute these to these girls. I don't go there and sell them. They don't want to, have anything to do with these women. So we need to go in and talk to them. We, as in those of us who are advocating against, advocating for the girls, that this is a horrible practice and it needs to stop. Because if the moms know that it's bad, some of them know, they just continue to do it. You know why? One woman at the UN said, I can't remember what country she's from. She said, it's a form of revenge. Because if I cannot enjoy sex, you are not going to enjoy sex. So that's why it continues. It's a cycle that needs to be broken. And when we go through this, we come back with lots of gifts. I didn't even enjoy getting up the gate. My stepmom took it from us. I don't even know what happened to the money I got. She took that. And so today I stand before you with a mutilated vagina, but it actually looks a lot better now, because all my life I thought it was type 1, which is just the removal of the clitoris. But when I went to see Dr. Bowers in California, she looked at me and she said, Francis, I've got bad news. I'm like, what? She said, what happened to you was not type 1, it was actually type 2. The woman who cut me was so drunk. Growing up, there was something actually hanging. I thought that because she was drunk, she just cut the clitoris in half. So in my book, I called it type F for favor. I didn't know. How many of you women actually sit there and take a mirror and examine your vagina to see, But I knew something was wrong because I had sense. I knew that they tampered with it. But the girls who happened to when they were babies, like in Nigeria, the Gambia, they don't even know they believe that that's how it's supposed to look like. And so she actually did a number on my vagina. And Dr. Barra said, I'll try as much as I can to fix it. I don't like to cut off people's skin, but I'll do my best. And after she did the surgery, oh my gosh, my vagina looks so beautiful. I carry that picture in my phone for 2 years whenever I go somewhere to speak. If you want to see what the surgery looks like, just come up, I'll show you my vagina, And people will actually come up and they'll see it. Because what they do, the clitoris is so long, it's inside. God knew exactly what he was doing when he created women like that. And he knew that somewhere in Egypt during the pharaohic days, they actually were the ones that came up with this. That somebody was going to get up one day and say, oh, you know what, let's control these women's sexuality and let's just amputate their clitoris. And so it's really long. So what they do with the restorative surgery, they remove the scar tissue because scar tissues form. And that's why some women die in childbirth. The elasticity is gone because the scar tissue forms and blocks the area. And so they'll scrape it and open you up again and pull it out a bit and then stitch it and hold it in place. So when people hear, oh, reconstructive or restorative surgery, they think it's plastic surgery. That's what I thought until I read more about it. And so it's there. It's been very good to me. I tell people that my husband is the beneficiary of my surgery. And when I say that he's in the audience, he will turn all sorts of colors. Poor guy. But I tell people, ask him if it works. Maybe you may not take my word for it, but ask him. It does work. And I remember after my surgery, came back to to Maryland. I was watching telly. And I saw two people kiss. I've seen people kiss on telly many times. And this time around, something happened. I felt sensation down there. And I quickly grabbed my phone and I said, Dr. Bauer, something just happened. And she said, that's the clitoris. That's what it's supposed to do. And I got angry all over again. I said, this is what they took from me. This is what they've taken from more than 200 million women and girls. And there are more at risk. And like I said, from the moment I've been standing here, we've had thousands of girls who've had their sexuality reconstructed. Some of these girls actually commit suicide because they can't take it. Some of these women, we don't want to go to doctors, especially in countries where they don't know about it. We go to doctors, oh my God, what happened to your anatomy? As if I don't know that something happened to it. Do you know, they make us feel as if we had something to do with it, and they make us feel less of a woman? When God created me, I was complete and whole. But August 1st, 1984, I was left whole but incomplete because a part of me was taken. Even though I've had restorative surgery, psychologically I feel better, and that was the reason why I did it. I feel a lot better. It's not because I want to enjoy sex. I have my days. But it's the mental thing. Okay, now, all right, when I walk around and I see a girl, okay, my vagina may not look exactly like hers, but hey, it's close, So it helps me with my self-esteem. Most survivors of FGM have low self-esteem. A woman once told me when she went for her PAP, unfortunately for her, there were interns And the doctor, male, I never go to male doctors. I don't have anything against you. I'm married to a man. But for a doctor, my doctor should always be a female, you know. The doctor actually asked her what was wrong, and she told him. The next thing he did, he called all the interns in, male, and paraded them and showed them this woman's vagina. I said, why didn't you sue him? She did not know that she could do that. And that was the last time she went for a pap smear exam. So these are the things that we need to keep in mind, things that we take for granted. You may go to the bathroom and to have a urination, and it will take you what? A few seconds? A woman who underwent a fibrillation, it takes her 30 minutes to pass one urination, half an hour. When it's time for their menses, severe abdominal pain, the blood doesn't even flow the way it's supposed to. And when they get married, they have to be defibrillated. They have to be opened up again. And that night, they're expected to have sex with their husband. So they go through the pain, even though it happened when they were 8 years old, they don't remember. But after defibrillation, when they get married, they have to have sex that night. The pain, the trauma. Some of these men don't care. They will rape you. If you don't want to have sex with them, even though you're married to them, they take what they want because you're my wife, I can do whatever I want. The reason why the UK is leading the fight against FGM because they're not afraid to talk about it. They have funding. Here we don't have that much funding. We're uncomfortable because we believe it's a cultural thing. We shouldn't get involved. Okay then, but let's protect the girls who were born in American sold to parents from practicing countries. They smuggle these girls out during the summer season to call vacation cutting, and they take them to their countries and perform FGM on them, and they swear them to secrecy. If you talk about it, you'll die. And you tell a 5-year-old that, of course, they'll believe it. I was 11, just that I was rebellious. I didn't believe it. So they won't talk about it. And what they do now in Maryland, they bring these cutters to the United States. They come and see a grandparent visiting their grandchild. And the moms gather all these kids and they perform FGM on them in the basement of somebody's home. Last year, I worked with the FBI because I've done a lot of training, law enforcement. This woman was actually going to take her daughter out of the country to Liberia for possible vacation cutting. And she reached out and I alerted the FBI, and they were intercepted at Dallas Airport. 3 months later, she did it again. 3 months later, she tried it again. But by this time, the girl's name was in the system. I don't know if you've heard of Operation Limelight. Her name was already in the system, so the minute they scanned her passport, a red flag, and so the FBI, the police, everybody descended on this poor mother. So she was actually protected from a possible vacation cutting. And the sad part of it, she comes to our support group meetings. She now knows everything about FGM. And she would have not come back to the States because her mom is here seeking asylum. She's a survivor of FGM. But she told the girl, we're going back home because I need to go see your father. And if you have to go through FGM, then it's a risk I have to take. Excuse me? I don't cuss, but that's the right place to use the F word. What the? Really? Just because you want to go home and have sex. So you're going to have your daughter touch you for the rest of her life by putting her at risk. Because if she had gone home, her grandmother is a cutter. So there's no way that girl would have been spared. So we just have to start the conversation. We can do all the talking that we want, but when we talk about FGM, let's be mindful of the terminologies we use. And let's also keep in mind that these people believe that it's their culture, it's part of their tradition. Okay, fine, but if we educate them, then they'll begin to know that, you know what, this is wrong after all. I did a video and I said it to the cutters. If you can actually tell me that you enjoy sex, then okay, fine. But if you're really truthful and honest, there is no way that you've undergone FGM and you still enjoy sex. So, I know I've talked a lot. I just want to end with what can we do? You can find organizations like Global Women Peace Foundation, it's in the Washington metro area, but you can get involved. You know, just volunteer. Every year in October, we have the Walk to End FGM. And we also have the AHA Foundation, if you want to reach out. They have a rep here, Alana, and Julia is here. So if you want to talk, my foundation is not yet a 501c3, so, yeah. But if you want to help, you can help. Like I said, I collect sanitary napkins. That's the other thing also. FGM and periods. I combine the two and they go home and I talk to these girls and I supply them sanitary napkins. So like I said, when I started, most of you in here have privilege. Yeah, you may not have experienced it. You may not even have met a survivor of FGM. Now you have. So let's just start let's just start talking about it. It's very uncomfortable, but we'll have to be comfortable talking about comfortable things. Sex trafficking, you know, before people didn't talk about it, but now they do, and they have millions and millions in funding. So let's just, you know, we have to start somewhere. I always say that God gives everybody, when He created us, He gave us each the choice to choose. Survivors of FGM were not given that choice. You know, we weren't. We were told that we were going somewhere to be made into women, and that was what we got. So we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, talking about uncomfortable things. I'll stop here and see if you have any questions. Nothing is too personal, so just ask me whatever you want to ask me. I'm here to answer.
And if you have a question, I'll hand you the mic. So does anyone have any questions?
Hi. What did you say was that location where parents can sue their children after that happens?
I'm sorry?
Did you mention in your talk about there's a country or state where?
Oh yeah, Virginia, Commonwealth of
Oh, okay,
Virginia.
it's in Virginia. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you feel what was said in Genesis contrasts with what you've been talking about tonight?
Do I what?
Do you know, the whole thing about men, women should be subordinate to men, even how do you stand in contrast to that?
Yeah, in some, like I said, it depends on the country where the practice is. Some of the men are the ones leading it. They believe that a girl who underwent female genital mutilation, I saw a video where the woman actually said, some of you fathers, when you see your daughters, you see cows. Because when they get married, the bride price, you get cows. And a girl who actually underwent FGM is what some of these men go for. So that way they can actually control them, and it actually makes them have multiple wives. Because if I don't want to be touched, you marry another, you bring another one, right? And same thing. So yeah, it's a control thing, and they believe that they're superior to women in some of these cultures. Not in, well, in parts of Sierra Leone, yes, in the villages, but not in the city. The girls are actually now standing up and fighting and talking for themselves. But yeah, it's all about inequality, you know, equal rights. The men think that they can still control these women, but in my country, some of the women are actually standing up and fighting. I don't know if that answered your question.
Any other questions? We have room for maybe a couple more questions. Oh, okay. And then I'll bring you.
So are you able to have a normal period even after you've experienced that? Or was that only due to the reconstructive surgery?
Oh no, I was able to have, what was the word? Regular, normal periods, yeah. But my sister on the other hand wasn't. Like every time that she was on her period, she was in so much pain. So I think now she thanks God that she's going through menopause. So she doesn't have to deal with that. But I didn't have any issues.
Someone over here.
How do you have the conversation of FGM with your partners and your husband?
Oh, my thing is out there. It's been out there since, so before he even met me, he knew my story. Yeah, so, but in countries where it's practiced, like 80%, 90%, you just know that, okay, well, whomever I'm with, I'm sure they've undergone FGM. But in my country, Sierra Leone, the Creoles, and my mom is a Creole, they do not practice it. And the guys can tell. So for me, I'm upfront. It's like meeting someone and say, hey, when I was 20, how old was I? 21, I had my son. And back home, you know, I said, I slept with men for money. You know, I dated men for money. And I'm no different from the girls who didn't know the men that they sold their bodies for, but I did because I had to feed me and my son. So if you think that that's going to be an issue, I'm not the right girl for you. So I just open up and I talk about the things that I've done. So with the talk of FGM, I tell them, look, I underwent FGM. It wasn't something had nothing, you know, it wasn't something I wanted, but it happened. Sometimes I don't want to be touched, so if you're looking for somebody to have sex with, I'm the wrong person. So if that's what you want, might as well just keep walking. So yeah, just be honest with them, and you know, people understand.
Thank you so much for being here today. But so you had your son when you were 21. Did you have any issues in delivering on that pregnancy?
Yes, I did. I was actually given an episiotomy, and because the baby could not find its way out, I was in labor for, I think, 12 hours, and I just lay there not knowing that the baby was actually trying to come. It was the nurse that came to, she got the lamp, the kerosene lantern, there was no light, and she looked to check, and she went back screaming to the doctor, hey, the baby's coming. And he caught me. I'm like, you just caught me. And he said, no, I didn't. I'm like, why would you even lie? And so after that, I lay there, no anesthesia, and he stitched me back. Oh my poor vagina, she's been through so much. But yeah, I did. And one thing I forgot to talk about, the poor vagina thing, but everybody, I believe, in the world should know that the vagina is the most powerful tool in the world, and that's why you have women and men trying to destroy her. I said, the vagina is so powerful. My vagina took me all the way to Paris, free of charge. I didn't have to sleep with anyone. I didn't have to pay a dime. My vagina took me to Paris because I had to be checked out when I had the surgery. Had I not undergone FGM and had the surgery, there is no way I would have gone to Paris for 2 weeks and done all the things I did, and you know, on someone else's dime. So, but yeah, and I had a friend who was in labor for 8 days because the scarring was so bad. She actually had type 3 done in Sierra Leone, which was surprising. The baby died in her stomach for 8 days because there was no passage, and she was in the village. She could have died. Same thing with her second baby, and with the third one, now she knew, they took her to the hospital, and she actually told them, it's because of what you did, and they still were in denial. They said, no, that's not supposed to happen. But, yeah.
All right, so we're gonna do one more question.
First, I'd like to echo the previous gentleman. Thank you so much for coming. And my question is, could you talk a little bit about the process of being able to get to the point where you are, where you can get up on the stage in front of a group of strangers and tell such sort of painful, intimate experiences?
Sure. It happened in college in New York. I remember they had some vendors come in and they talked about different topics. One of them was female genital, I think they call it the female circumcision. And that's the fancy term they give it because they don't think that it's mutilation. And so we have some, I call them champion of the idiots, who think that FGM and male circumcision are the same. I mean, you have a penis. I don't have a penis and I don't have a foreskin. So, but if you want to think that FGM is the same as male circumcision, fine. But I went to that class. I signed up for that one in particular because I wanted to hear what the speaker had to say. And I was right. I got there and I took the front seat. I was very quiet. I'm not a talkative person. Out of this place, you see me, I don't go out of my way to make friends. It's not because I'm not friendly, but I just have this wall. But when she got to know me, that's it. So I sat there and she was talking about FGM, but she started giving some incorrect information. So I raised my hand and I said, yes, can I say something? And she said, sure. I said, I'm a survivor actually, can I talk? And she was so relieved. She said, please, take over. So I did, and some of the questions that some of my fellow students were asking, so with type 3, is it true that when they undergo FGM, they stitch them up, and every time they want to have sex, they remove the stitches and then afterwards stitch them up again? I mean, no, that happened only once, and so that was how I actually found my voice, even though I had been talking about it, but that was how I found my voice. And then I remember for my theater media class, and this is a predominantly white school, we had about 5 black students on the entire campus. For my theater media class, we had to talk about any issue, so I chose FGM. The poor teacher, I felt so bad. Professor Wanzi, I'll never forget him. He was crying, all the girls were crying. And he came afterwards and he gave me a hug and he apologized. I'm like, you didn't do it, but you gave me a platform to actually stand here and talk. And I believe that I wasn't judged. So once I realized that people were not judging, they were listening, then I found my voice. And I said, you know what, the world needs to hear about FGM. And even though I've been called all sorts of names, it doesn't matter to me. It's not about me, it's about the girls who are at risk. I said I'll continue to lend my voice until the whole world has heard about FGM. So that's how I'm standing here today.